In 1878, in Yell County, Arkansas, a family man named Frank Ross hires Tom Cheney and takes him to Fort Smith, Arkansas, to help him lead back a string of Mustang ponies he had bought. There, Tom loses all his money getting drunk and playing cards. Angered by this, Tom claims that he had been cheated in the game and challenges everyone to a gunfight. Sensing the impending doom, Frank intervenes and tries to calm his employee, but is tragically gunned down by Tom, who then robs him of his gold pieces and flees.
No doubt Cheney fancied himself scot-free.
Following this incident, the sheriff of the small town sends his men after Tom, but soon learns that he has joined forces with a notorious criminal named Lucky Ned Pepper and his gang and fled to Indian Territory where the sheriff has no jurisdiction. Hence, he calls his men off without much hesitation, as the victim was an outsider who was not going to be missed by the locals. A few days later, the tragic news reaches the victim's family. Mrs. Ross, who's devastated by grief, and his 3 young kids, 14-year-old Maddie, her younger sister Victoria, and her toddler brother Frank Jr. While the family is crippled by the loss, realizing that Frank Jr. is too young to take action, Maddie assumes responsibility to see to her father's remaining affairs and exact revenge on his killer by bringing him to justice. To this effect, Maddie travels to Fort Smith with her butler Yarnell and goes to the undertaker to collect her father's body.
Is that the man?
That is my father.
There, Maddie decides to have Yarnell transport her father's body to the train station and accompany it home, while she stays in Fort Smith and takes care of the remaining affairs, as they can't afford to rent a boarding house for both of them.
Well, $60 is every cent we have. It leaves nothing for our board.
After a lengthy debate, Maddie manages to convince Yarnell, who's uneasy about leaving a young girl in a strange town by herself, and sends him on his way, while she stays back, pays all her money to the undertaker, and gives her father an honorable send-off. Then, Maddie negotiates with the undertaker to let her spend a night there free of charge and leaves to go see the sheriff.
Well, this business Mama doesn't know about. It's all right, Yarnell. I dismiss you.
On her way, Maddie sees a public hanging unfold from afar and joins the crowd to watch as the 3 condemned men give their last words and are hanged. As the crowd cheers and applauds the deaths of the criminals, Maddie finds out the identity of the sheriff and approaches him to learn the status of the investigation into Tom. The sheriff explains shortcomings of his efforts to apprehend the murderer and, sensing that the young girl is desperate to see Tom brought to justice, advises her to personally hire a U.S. Marshal as a bounty hunter, as the case would be very low on the U.S. Marshal's priority list otherwise. Then, Maddie considers the profiles of the sheriff's 3 candidates carefully, chooses the meanest one with the most grit, named Reuben Rooster Cogburn, and searches for him. After hours of searching, Maddie locates Rooster, boldly stalks him to an outhouse in a local bar, and tries to convince him to take her case, but fails.
You have been at it for quite some time, Mr. Cogburn.
There is no clock on my business.
That night, Maddie returns to the undertaker and courageously spends the night in the morgue. The next morning, hoping to raise enough money to get her by and persuade Rooster to take her case, Maddie rises early and goes to speak to a horse trader named Colonel Stonehill at his shop, confidently walks in, and demands that he buy back the ponies he sold her father, which surprises the colonel, who quickly rebukes the offer. However, the courageous young girl drives a hard bargain and threatens to take the matter to court, as her father's horse was killed under the colonel's watch. Hence, after much back and forth, the colonel is forced to accept Maddie's offer and promises to give her the money once she brings a letter from her lawyer absolving him of any responsibility in the matter.
I would not pay $325 for Winged Pegasus.
Maddie then negotiates to take a down payment from the colonel and heads to the Monarch boarding house, where her father had been staying. There, the owner, Mrs. Floyd, welcomes her open-heartedly, gives her her father's belongings, including his gun, and rents her a shared room with an old woman, as the boarding house is filled to the brim with visitors who have come to town to watch the hanging.
Now that is everything. There are no light fingers in this house.
That night, sleep evades Maddie as the old woman snores and keeps her up. The next morning, despite being tired from the lack of sleep, Maddie wakes up early and searches for Rooster at the courthouse, where she hears him testifying about a shooting incident and confirms that he's not afraid to use his weapons.
Never shot nobody I didn't have to.
Well, that was not the question.
After the hearing, Maddie approaches Rooster once more, presents her case, the reward money she has prepared, and urges the marshal to get on board. However, seeing that Maddie's too young to enter into a contract with, Rooster declines the offer.
Don't believe in fairy tales or sermons or stories about money, baby sister.
The next morning, Maddie is shocked to find a Texas Ranger named LeBeouf in her room and wonders what's going on. LeBeouf explains that he's been after Tom, who is also wanted for killing a state senator for months, and asked to join her and Rooster in pursuing him. However, Maddie turns down his idea as she doesn't want Tom to be taken to Texas to face his crime and instead is desperate for him to be hanged in Fort Smith for killing her father, and mocks the Texas Ranger for failing to do his job effectively.
And that you have been eluded the winter long by a half-wit.
Then, Maddie receives the required letter from her lawyer and presents it to Colonel Stonehill.
I trust the enclosed document will let you conclude your business and return to Yell County.
Then, as the colonel pays her, Maddie surprises him once more and negotiates to buy one of the ponies he bought back from her for a fair price.
I need a pony and I will pay $10 for one of them.
No, that's a lot price, no.
Once the deal is settled, Maddie goes to the colonel's stable, picks a black pony, and names it Little Blackie.
Call him Little Blackie. That's a good name. Like Mr. Stonehill for me? Nope.
Then, Maddie tracks Rooster and finds him sleeping in the back of a local grocery store. After a lot of back and forth, Maddie convinces the marshal to take the case and accepts his price. But the duo once again gets into a fight as Maddie declares she will join Rooster on his quest to Indian country, as she fears that he will drink his payment away and fail to accomplish the job. After a lengthy debate, the marshal gives in and decides to meet Maddie the next morning and set off with her.
I'm not paying for talk. I can get all the talk I need and more at the Monarch boarding house.
That evening, Maddie writes a letter to her mother detailing her plans and promising to avenge her father's death. The next morning, Maddie sets out with Little Black and arrives at the grocery on the scheduled time.
The author of all things watches over me, and I have a fine horse.
However, there, Maddie learns that Rooster has left her a train ticket to her hometown and a letter which explains that he has left without her and advises her to leave him alone to do his job.
By the time you read this, I will be across the river in the Indian Nation.
Undeterred by the events, Maddie rushes to the river, sees Rooster and LeBeouf across it in Indian country, and asks a local man to help her cross. However, the man explains that he was told to expect her and take her to the sheriff by Rooster, and proceeds to force her back. Maddie then unexpectedly attacks the man, ferociously rides Little Blackie into the river, and starts crossing it. As Rooster and LeBeouf watch in awe, Maddie and Little Blackie manage to swim across the river, make it to Indian country, and join them. Then, Maddie scolds the marshal for leaving her behind and threatens to report him to the U.S. Marshal's office as a thief for nullifying their agreement. Outraged by the audacity of the young girl, LeBeouf forces Maddie off her horse and spanks her for her disrespect.
Are you going to let him do this, Marshal?
Maddie struggles to free herself from LeBeouf's grip and begs Rooster to intervene. After a few minutes, Rooster orders LeBeouf to stop punishing Maddie at gunpoint. Then, after traveling together all day, the trio calls it a day and takes a rest by a fire for the night. However, as the night grows, Rooster and LeBeouf get into a lengthy argument over their differing life principles and backgrounds, and Maddie is forced to break the tension.
Would you two like to hear the story of the Midnight Caller?
The next morning, Maddie finds a moment alone with Rooster, demands to learn more about his agreement with LeBeouf, learns that they have agreed to capture and take Tom to Texas to split the reward money, becomes furious, and explains that she needs Tom to be executed in Fort Smith. Then, LeBeouf joins in the conversation, but once again gets into an argument with the marshal, which soon terminates their agreement and forces LeBeouf to go his separate way.
Adios!
Maddie and Rooster continue on their way and soon make it to the marshal's friend, named Bagby's store.
That would be a bitter disappointment, Marshal. What do we do?
There, Rooster learns that one of Ned's men, named Coke Hayes, has stopped by and traded for supplies with Frank's gold piece.
Slides with this.
Then, Rooster makes an educated guess that the gang has probably gone north to the Winding Stair Mountains and heads there with Maddie in tow. On the long journey there, Rooster shares his past with Maddie, including his personal life and the many experiences he had as a U.S. Marshal.
My wife did not care for the company of my river friends.
Then, after traveling for half a day through the woods, the duo comes upon a hanged body in the trees. Hoping to find out the man's identity and check if it's anyone he knows, Rooster orders Matty to climb up the tree and slowly cut him down, as he can't do it himself due to his old age and bigger size.
Possibly in the belief it'd make him more dead.
Soon, a local man arrives on a horse, and once he confirms that Rooster doesn't know the hanged body, takes it with him in hopes of using it to trade for supplies.
But it is a dead body. Possibly worth something in trade.
The duo continues their journey to the mountains, but is soon stopped by the sound of a gunshot, which is fired by the local man to inform them that someone is following them.
I asked that engine to signal with a shot if someone was on our trail.
Then, as they wait for their pursuer, the duo is surprised to see an old dentist, who offers them his medical services before advising them to head to a dugout a few miles away, to take shelter for the night, and heads on his way.
2 dental mirrors and a bottle of expectorant.
After a couple of hours, the duo reaches the dugout and sees that it is occupied by 2 outlaws named Emmett Quincy and Moon. Upon Rooster's orders, Matty slowly climbs on the roof and dampens the chimney, which fills the small house with smoke. Soon, a gunfight ensues, and Rooster severely injures Moon.
I'm a federal officer! Who's in there?
Inside the house, Emmett denies any knowledge of Ned's or Tom's whereabouts and refuses to cooperate with Rooster, while Moon becomes tempted to reveal what he knows and get some help for his injuries. Then, as Moon tries to share some information, he is fatally attacked by Emmett, who is soon killed by Rooster. In his dying breath, Moon reveals that Ned and his men are on their way to the dugout and sends a farewell message to his family.
Send the news to my brother, George Garrett.
Then, Rooster and Matty leave the dugout and hide in the surrounding darkness to wait for their target and open a surprise attack. However, after a few minutes of waiting, they spot LeBeef arrive at the scene and head to the dugout. Unfortunately, before the duo can warn LeBeef of the looming danger, Ned and his gang arrive. Then, as Rooster and Matty watch, the gang proceeds to enter the dugout to ambush LeBeef, and Rooster shoots and kills a couple of them. Soon, the gangs return fire and a shootout ensues. Unfortunately, Rooster accidentally shoots LeBeef, who's tied up and dragged around in the field, in the shoulder. As the chaos continues, Rooster manages to kill most of the men, except Ned, who swiftly escapes the ordeal. Once the coast is clear, the duo checks on LeBeef and learns that he will be okay.
Well, that's quite possible. The scheme did not develop as I had planned.
Then, Matty eagerly goes around inspecting the dead bodies and is truly disappointed that none of them is Tom.
Neither of these men are Cheney.
I know it. I know them both.
After evaluating everything, Rooster concludes that Ned will probably ride back and hide out in the mountains for at least a few more days, and plans to head there and confront his gang the next day. Then, LeBeef's wound is cleaned and dressed, and the men head inside the dugout for the night while Matty stays out a while longer with Little Blackie, excitedly detailing their plans to ambush the gang and promising that it will all be over soon.
Seems that we will overtake Tom Cheney in the Winding Stair Mountains.
Then, Matty returns to the dugout and finds LeBeef listing Tom's crimes, the different aliases he uses, and how hard it's been trying to find him. The trio spends the night there and plans to head out early the next morning. However, the next morning, Matty and LeBeef are concerned to see that Rooster had spent all night drinking without a wink of sleep.
I do not believe he slept.
After a few hours into the journey, Rooster, still under the influence, picks a fight with LeBeef by telling him to return home, as his injury makes him a weak link. LeBeef rebukes this and shares his doubt about the Marshal's aim, which provokes Rooster and forces him to demonstrate his skill. The men spend the next few minutes in a shooting game, each trying to hit the target faster than the other, until Matty intervenes and reminds them of their original goal to catch the criminals.
My bullet!
Your bullet!
The men then calm down, and the trio continues to navigate the treacherous journey. The trio travels all day and finally reaches the mountain finds a cave, and tries to coax Ned and his men out, but is disappointed to find no one there. That night, the trio makes fire and sets up camp in the woods, where Maddie tries to look after the injured LaBeouf. Still drunk, the Marshal once again challenges LaBeouf and questions what he has to offer, which infuriates LaBeouf into deciding to go his separate way.
This is no longer a manhunt. It is a debauch.
However, as LaBeouf prepares to leave, the Marshal shocks everyone by announcing that he has given up on the quest, explaining that Tom, Ned, and the Pepper Gang have probably fled the country by now, and asks LaBeouf to take Maddie with him.
A fine thing to decide once you brought her into the middle of the Choctaw Nation.
LaBeouf becomes outraged at the Marshal for his irresponsible decision to leave behind a young girl in the middle of nowhere and calls him out.
I shall make my own camp elsewhere.
Maddie intervenes and tries to calm down the men and lift their spirits by telling them they are too close to give up, but it falls on deaf ears.
Not so close to our goal with Tom Cheney nearly in hand.
In hand!
Instead, Rooster continues rambling on about the hopelessness of their situation. In a drunken slur, officially terminates his agreement with Maddie and passes out.
Your $50 gone. Gone the whiskey.
Then, Maddie runs after LaBeouf and begs him to take her with him.
I will be no more of a burden to you than I was to the Marshal.
That is not my worry.
However, LaBeouf declines Maddie's request and explains that the Marshal is correct in his assessment that the case has gone cold and stresses that it's pointless to continue chasing the wind. Despite Maddie being disappointed by this, she thanks LaBeouf for everything, appreciates his grit, and confesses that she had misjudged him and that she had hired the wrong man.
I would go on in your company if there were a clear way to go.
LaBeouf admits that he has also misjudged the young girl, praises her intelligence, dedication, and strength, and extends his hand as a show of respect and courtesy.
I extend my hand.
Mr. LaBeouf, please.
Maddie shakes LaBeouf's hand, the two share an emotional farewell, and the Texas Ranger rides off into the night.
Adios.
Maddie returns to Rooster and takes care of the passed-out man. The next morning, as the Marshal sleeps off his hangover, Maddie rises early and goes to the nearby river to fetch some water. There, in an unexpected turn of events, Maddie spots Tom from afar as he waters his horses in the river. At first, the fugitive is wary at the sight of Maddie and pulls his rifle. However, he soon recognizes her, calms down, and slowly approaches her while wondering what she's doing so far away from her home. Soon, Tom gets the surprise of his life when the young girl pulls out her late father's revolver and orders him to surrender, follow her back to Fort Smith, and face the law.
I have come to take you back to Fort Smith.
Amused by the courage of the young girl, Tom flatly refuses to follow her orders despite Maddie's bluff that she has numerous officers with her waiting to take him in. Then, as Tom approaches Maddie aggressively, she shoots him in his side and, despite falling down from the recoil, quickly gets up to finish him off while demanding that Tom give her the rest of her father's gold pieces.
Oh, one of my short ribs broken.
You killed my father when he was trying to help you.
In the woods, the Marshal is luckily awakened by the gunshot and calls out for Maddie, who cries out for help. However, things escalate badly from then on as Maddie's revolver misfires and fails to shoot Tom, who quickly reaches her. Soon, Maddie and Tom engage in a fistfight before Tom overpowers the young girl and proceeds to kidnap her as the Marshal arrives on the scene. Then, Ned and the gang appear out of their hiding and exchange fire with Rooster, while Tom hands them Maddie and warns them to quickly get away. A few minutes later, Ned holds Maddie at gunpoint, calls her bluff, and forces her to admit that her team consists of only Rooster.
Tell me another lie and I'll stove your head in.
Just the Marshal.
Ned calls out to Rooster and threatens to kill the girl unless he retreats. The Marshal uses his years of experience to gauge the situation and carefully chooses his methods. He then feigns ignorance of Maddie's safety, requests Ned to leave her and Tom behind and flee the area, and in exchange, offers to mislead the U.S. Marshals arriving soon so that the gang can make a clean escape.
Don't up that hill. Quiet.
Then, Ned takes Maddie up the hill to his gang's settlement and feeds her. Tom arrives there soon and gets his wound treated while cursing at Maddie. Then, Ned takes Maddie aside and asks her how she got mixed up with the Marshal, and notes the young girl's grit as she explains Tom's crime and the length she has gone to bring him to justice.
I'll leave you to scream and rock. How do you like that?
Ned then asks about his men shot at the dugout a few days ago, and Maddie explains each of their fates in detail. Soon, Ned spots Rooster from afar, hears him fire a shot signaling him to leave the area, fires a shot to signal the message is well received, and prepares to flee with his men.
Let us move, Ned.
In good time, Doctor.
Then, once everything is set, Ned explains the shortage of horses, orders Tom to stay back with Maddie for the time being, promises to send someone to come get him as soon as possible, warns him not to harm Maddie, and threatens not to pay him otherwise. Soon, Maddie is forced to spend time with her father's murderer and is terrified. Hoping to assure her safety, Maddie promises Tom that she will give a positive testimony to the court on his behalf if he leaves her alone. However, feeling hopeless and surmising that the gang has abandoned him for good, Tom attacks and chokes Maddie. Luckily, LaBeef shows up out of nowhere, knocks Tom out, and rescues the young girl.
Strange to be so close to him at last.
Then, LaBeouf details that he had heard a gunshot by the river earlier, rushed back, found the Marshal, and formulated a plan with him to rescue Maddie, and found his way to her. Meanwhile, according to the plan, Rooster reneges on his deal with Ned, doubles back around, and confronts him and 3 of his men. As LaBeouf and Maddie watch from a hill, Ned reminds Rooster of their deal and asks him to let them go. However, Rooster refuses, tells the rest of the men to stand down, and orders Ned to surrender. This doesn't go as planned, however, and after a lengthy back and forth, Rooster starts shooting with both his hands and boldly charges against the 4 men.
Shoot them, Mr. LaBeef.
Too far. Moving too fast.
The gunfight escalates quickly, and Rooster manages to kill 2 of the gang members and forces one to flee, but is shot in the process. Then, Rooster continues his charge, comes face to face with Ned, and is shot a couple of times more. Soon, Rooster's horse is shot and falls down. Gravely injured, Ned uses this opportunity to approach Rooster and proceeds to finish him off, but is soon killed by an excellent shot by LaBeef from 400 yards away.
Some bully shot! That was 400 yards at least.
However, before LaBeef and Maddie celebrate this feat, Tom regains consciousness, sneaks up on them, hits LaBeef with his gun, and knocks him out. Maddie recovers from the shock quickly, collects herself, and snatches the rifle out of the fugitive's hand. She then takes a moment to face her father's murderer with determination and shoots him off the hill. Unfortunately, before she can celebrate avenging her father's death, the recoil from the rifle knocks the young skinny girl into a snake den. Then, as Maddie cries out for LaBeouf to help her, she sees a corpse lying next to her and pulls it towards her in hopes of taking the rifle on top of it. However, soon Maddie sees a rattlesnake hidden in the corpse and becomes terrified.
Oh, Mr. LaBeef!
Soon, Rooster arrives on the scene, hears Maddie's increasing screams, rushes to the mouth of the den, throws in a rope, and jumps in to rescue her. However, the rattlesnake bites Maddie on her hand. Rooster shoots and kills the snakes, reaches Maddie, marks the bite mark on her hand with a knife, and sucks the venom out. Rooster then frees Maddie, carries her, and signals LaBeef to pull them up.
We're up, Mr. LaBeef. Take her.
Then, Rooster hurriedly puts Maddie on Little Blackie and thanks LaBeef for saving his life. Finally, the men truly reconcile with each other and bid each other a respectful farewell. Then, the Marshal promises to send help for LaBeef and rushes away to get Maddie to a doctor as fast as possible.
Never doubt the Texas Ranger.
Come on.
Rooster rides through the treacherous journey back to civilization all day and tries to motivate Little Blackie to go even faster. However, by midnight, the poor pony succumbs to its exhaustion and falls down. Rooster cautiously carries off the delirious Maddie and shoots and kills Little Blackie. Rooster carries the ailing girl and continues the rest of the way on foot. After hours of breathless walking, Rooster reaches Bagby's store and signals for help.
I'm grown old.
By the time the unconscious Maddie is given medical care, her hand has turned black and is amputated. The Marshal waits until the young girl is out of danger and parts on his way. 25 years later, in 1903, Rooster writes to Maddie informing her that he has joined a traveling Wild West show and sends her an invitation to see him in Memphis. However, when she gets there, Maddie is devastated to learn that the Marshal had died 3 days prior and was buried in a Confederate cemetery. Maddie, who has never married and had a family of her own, then has Rooster's body moved to her family cemetery in Yell County, Arkansas, and visits him frequently, despite the local gossip.